Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Rock and Metal Managers Meetup. For those of you who are still unfamiliar with EMA, we are the European Music Managers Alliance. We are an umbrella organization of music manager trade organizations across Europe. And we have a project called the Empower Program, which is funded by Creative Europe, in which we dedicate ourselves to education, research, advocacy, and networking. This is part of our networking. These are our genre networks that we have set up across rock and metal managers, pop managers, electronic and dance, and hip hop R&B managers. And we don't do this alone. We do this with a core team of managers that we have selected. They are with us today as well. They're Bradley, Urs, Katja, and Emma that you see in our Zoom. Today is our first Rock and Metal Manager Meetup. We're going to start with a panel discussion, which is going to be followed with a Q&A, and you can drop your questions for the Q&A in the chat throughout the panel. And after this, we will have 2 rounds of breakout or rooms where you can all meet each other. So I will now pass the word to Emma, who will take on the panel.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. So I'm going to start with our panel today. So I'd like to welcome Johan, Ulysses, and Julie. And they're all going to be talking to you about live and touring. So if I start with Johan. Johan, I know you've worked with quite a few different roles in the music industry, but what are you currently working? Can you tell me a bit more about your management company at the moment?
Yeah, I run my own management company, and I currently manage 6 artists in total, completely different all over the place, from funk to indie pop. But I also manage 4 acts that are more in the metal, say, scene. And again, different types of metal. One is more like a new metal act called The Last Element. They are currently signed to AFM. One is a new upcoming female metal singer named Andri from Greece. She was a runner-up at The Voice and singing metal. One is Marco Mendoza, who is based in California and is a former bass player of Thin Lizzy, Whitesnake, Dead Daisies, and he's all over the place touring. He's been touring Europe since, actually, we were on the plane together on May 5th. We both flew from Los Angeles to Europe. He stayed until last week. So like touring nonstop in Europe.
Wow.
And also in the metal is I manage Adrian Vandenberg, former guitar player of Whitesnake. The heyday of Whitesnake, I might proudly say. And I've known him since then. So he plays in his own band, Vandenberg. And we released a new album 2 weeks ago, and with pretty good chart successes in the Netherlands, Japan, Germany, US. So yeah.
Lovely. So let's start with the most positive thing. So what do you feel like your biggest success has been in management, but on the live side and touring, and sort of, is there a key thing that you're most proud of with your one of your artists or all your artists?
But we're talking about the metal, right?
Yeah, rock and metal artists. Yeah,
okay, because I manage an indie pop act that I actually got from playing within 3 years, from playing to in front of literally 10 people in a bar to selling out the Ahoy in Rotterdam, which is 13,000 capacity.
That's amazing.
So yeah, that was a major achievement. I think, to be honest, one of my biggest achievement was securing a really good and reliable US agent for Vandenberg.
Yeah.
I've been trying so hard, and I've been having so many conversations with so many different agents, and they would all make either promises or be telling me, it's not worthwhile, or it won't happen, or the golden oldie circuit is dead, and what have you. And I had 2 agents confirmed, and then after 3-4 months, nothing happened. So I was about to give up. And then I was introduced to finally an agent who, I had a first conversation with him. His name is Gary Buck, with Reliant Talent. He does he does the Who in America. He does Joe Bonamassa, but he does John Waite, and a whole lot more. And he said, "You know what, Johan?" And I'll never forget his words. He said, "I think I'm going to help you to hit this ball out of the park, because I think there is a market for Vandenberg." And we started working together, and within 2 weeks, he came up with a tour proposal, and we now have a tour confirmed. We have 2 legs confirmed. The first leg is 30 shows happening in February, March, and the second leg is another 30 shows happening in September in the US. And sort of getting the band back there. It's going to be their first shows. It's actually band shows since 1986.
Oh wow.
So to actually have these two tours confirmed, and to actually hopefully make some money for the band also. That's
always a nice thing. Yeah.
That is probably
with that moment, like, what do you feel did you learn anything from that, or take away anything in terms of like the challenges that you had with trying to find that agent?
Basically, not to take no for an answer. Or what I found pretty, I don't know, intimidating actually, is that you hear nothing. Like, you have, in total, I must have spoken to 5 or 6 different agents. And I was introduced by a mutual friend who actually is a well-known manager in the US, very successful. So I had this guy introducing me to these agents. So I had a warm introduction. Then they all set up a meeting, and we're like, "Oh, Vandenberg, man." There was even one guy who showed me a picture of him hanging out with Adrian Vandenberg at a Whitesnake show in 1991. I'm like, okay, I'm in. And then after the meeting, you hear nothing. They're ghosting you. They go silent completely. And I'm like, is it me? Have I said something wrong? And just, then to pick up with the next one and try again and keep on trying. So just take no for an answer is probably the most important thing I've learned.
Yeah, that's really good advice for everyone. I know I certainly need that advice sometimes to just keep pushing through. So how important do you say live touring has been for the careers of all, like, the rock artists on your
It's crucial.
Yeah, crucial. It's
totally
so
crucial.
That's why it's sort of, this panel so important.
And there's quite frankly, there's no, in this day and age, there's no bread and butter without playing live.
Have you got an example of someone that you work with that it's been more important to, or that you feel has been like the most important part of making it in their careers?
Yeah, I mean, making that record and having that record deal and having it put out, and then hopefully, a good marketing team behind it, of course, is crucial. It's the basis of the career. But then to go out and play live, have a solid agent in all major markets, that is crucial in my experience, for any act.
Yeah. So talking about that specific example, or another example, have you got a specific strategy that you've used in terms of live touring, like starting small, working into different areas or something like that? Like, are there any strategies that you feel have been really effective for your specific artists?
To me, it's not like grab anything you can. You have to, it has to make sense. I've had like support tours offered to some of my acts that I go, that doesn't make sense at all. And it goes as far as, I remember a few years back, a band I managed who played, very successful and loud guitar band, and they were invited to support Taylor Swift. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense to me. So we said no. No, so not grab, but find good pairings. But also, you know, don't feel too proud not to support a certain band because you think in the past I was bigger than them. It's not about that. I mean, you know, you see all these big names helping each other, and then suddenly bands who would sell out stadiums now as special guests to bands who are currently doing better. But you got to stay active and you got to stay on the scene. That's the most important thing. Fans have to be able to see you play live. So don't be too picky. I mean, don't accept everything, but don't be too picky either.
That's great advice. And I noticed you've got a couple of sort of more emerging artists on your roster. What do you feel is like the biggest challenge that you faced, especially post-COVID, with those, and how have you kind of overcome those? Or
no costings, prices of everything have gone up incredibly, to the point where it's to put a new upcoming band on the road is almost impossible without financial backing. And the bands, if it's bands, it's okay. The bands, you know, it's just 4 or 5 guys in a band. They can say, we're okay with not making any money. If we break even, we're good. But if you have like a solo singer and you have to hire musicians, that's tough. It's really tough and difficult to put a new upcoming band on the road. So here you have to be really choosy and what does make sense. Hopefully get some good festival slots, get a good support slot, and then of course having a decent network always helps. But I mean, costs of everything from fuel to, I mean, we're currently trying to rent a nightliner in the US. It's wow, it's unbelievable. And but also, you know, and it's okay because during COVID we noticed I have my own production company also for touring in the Netherlands, and we noticed during COVID that some of these guys, actually a lot of these guys who were either sound engineer or lighting guy or backliner or whatever, they gave up and they chose another profession. So those who stayed on, the demand for these specialized crew is much higher than the availability. So prices have gone up dramatically. Where I could say 5 years ago, oh, it's a tour, it's 30 dates, I can pay you 30 times half of what you normally get. It's now like I would have to pay 30 times their full wage. Otherwise, I'll say, we'll go to the next band.
Yeah. And do you think with all these, like, with it being a little bit more difficult since COVID, has that changed the way that you look at bands in terms of working with them?
No.
It went with newer bands, like would you sort of sign a newer band now, or would you wait till they go? It's not changed the way you feel at all.
If I hear the record, if I hear a song, if I hear the music and I want to put it on repeat, then I want to work with them.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, I'm going to move on to I'm going to move on to Julie now, and then we'll come back with everyone for the group panel. Yeah. So Julie, I know you've worked quite a few job roles in the music industry. What are you up to now, and can you talk about your sort of management experience?
Well, the funny thing is, I'm not actually a manager. I have
your label now.
So that's why I'm kind of like sitting on this panel going, oh, don't hate me.
But you're super experienced. You've worked with a lot of bands in the past.
I've done quite a few jobs. I've worked in the music industry now for 33 years, which must be doing something okay to still be here, I suppose. But and actually I've worked with Ulysses on a few things too, ironically. And Brad, actually. We had one of his artists produce one of our albums. But I started off in the music industry just because I wanted to work in it. And I think that was in about I think it's about 1994 I started. And I started working in a record shop. So actually it's slightly less than 33 years. But I'd worked in music while I was still at college. So I was doing photography, writing for things, but I actually legitimately started working in the industry in 94. But so I have been a fanzine writer. I've been a journalist. I've been a photographer. I worked in a record shop, which to this day was probably one of my favorite jobs because I got loads of free stuff. I got learnt more stuff, I would imagine. I learned about more bands in that record shop. It was an industrial, hardcore and metal shop in Leeds called Nail Records, Nail in the Coffin of Music. ironically, cheery bunch. But I left there to go and do a master's in London after I'd finished my bachelor's. Went to do a master's in London, and I never left really. So I worked at an independent record label where I was a merchandising manager. Moved up to a label manager, but while I was still there, I also started managing artists. So I was still wearing quite a few hats then, and I think it's probably sat me in quite good stead, because from 1993, 1994, when I started working in the industry, I've looked at everything from live to merchandising to publishing to brand to sync to actually the core job of putting out records. So I've seen things change a lot. I mean, when I first started working in the office, we were on dial-up internet. And my boss at the time was working on a typewriter with Tipex. Wow. And I had to literally cajole him into getting a laptop. It was absolutely nightmarish, because he would make all corrections on everything on printed out pieces of paper that he would write over. Oh, it was infuriating. But but it set me in really good stead, because I've been doing contractual negotiations from really early doors as well because of that. And I moved on from doing that to signing a lot of artists. So I went from being a label manager to signing artists, to managing artists, and then to working with the majors and consulting with them as well. So I'm now director of A&R for Rock and Alternative at Sony in the UK. And that puts me in a very privileged position, which I do really love where we are. And we do get left alone because we sit in a position that when all the weird stuff comes through the doors, it generally ends up on my desk. And I love that, because I love a challenge. So at the moment we work with Tool, Porcupine Tree. We also work with a band called Buried Tomorrow. We worked with AHA recently, which is quite an eye-opening experience for us. It was great, because we never worked with it was a band I grew up with as well. We work with a fantastic band called Witch Fever, who one of Brad's artists was the producer on. And we're working with a band called Hot Milk, who are managed by the guys who look after the Foo Fighters, not the management team, but the tour management team, who also look after Blink. So we look after quite a wide stable of people, and I also mentor young artists coming through the industry, specifically women, and want more women to come into the industry and stay in it, because this genre is, yes, I know but the genre is still a very sort of male, pale and stale environment, and we need a little bit more diversity, and we need more disruption, I think. And I enjoy disrupting, and I just enjoy people who like to plow their own furrow and who don't care about what anybody thinks. They just do what they want to do, and I love that. Yeah, definitely on my level then. So talking of that you've done so much, have you got a highlight that you've been a part of specifically with live and touring with one of your artists? I would say with all of our artists, I still get excited to this day when I see them play one of their first shows, because I think that's really important, and see sort of the room actually get it. It's awful when you see people play and people are talking and things like that, but when there's that sort of light bulb moment where people actually get it and people are right behind an artist, I absolutely love that. But I mean, I signed Bring Me the Horizon when Ollie was about 18, literally just turning 18. Yeah, because I know you had the rock club in London, didn't you? We had some birds, yeah. We had the guys play that as well. Yeah, how important do you feel that was for sort of, all these bands that were so iconic that went through there and are now sort of doing amazing? Well, I know a lot of artists who are now artists with guitars because of that. Yeah. And I'm really, really pleased about that. And it shows the importance of grassroots music sort of really does. And it's also the access to artists at that time, because I know there was a lot of people meeting artists that they maybe didn't know when they were probably 12 or 13. And I'm hoping that it's changed a lot of people's minds. Rather than going and seeing Harry Styles, they're going to go and see Turnstile. Yeah. So kind of switching from positives to sort of negatives, have you got something that you've sort of the biggest challenge that you found with live, and how have you overcome that in the past? To be honest, I'm just going to echo what Johan said here, because I think one of our biggest challenges now is the fact that after COVID, a load of our amazing touring personnel are no longer in the industry, and it's an absolute killer. I mean, people have left to be anything from carpenters to paramedics and accountants. Who'd want to be an accountant? I understand the interest of the others, but that breaks my heart, because there's so many amazing people out there that have left because they just couldn't sustain their own careers, and that really, really upset me. And at that time, I mean, ironically, I'd moved over from the indie world into Sony just before that. And anybody who runs an indie label or anything now, I have to doff my hat to, because it's become harder to gain traction and harder to shout through the noise. It's never been as easy to get your music out there, but it's harder to get yourself seen and heard. So, I mean, for me, financially, that Brexit was a killer for us as well, because, I mean, now, in order just to get us into Europe, it's a carnet that costs thousands of pounds. That's problematic for us. If we're going to, like, sort of, there's a lot of fly-in shows that people can't afford to do now, unless they're, like, traveling with a tiny B-rig. So it's just, I mean, the state of the British economy because of Brexit has kind of shafted the lot of us. And it's also shafted people the other way around, because coming into the UK is a really expensive thing now as well.
Again, has that changed the way that you now work with artists, or that you've been sort of their strategies and things? And
I don't think you can afford to change a really good live strategy if you're going to make it work. But now, where we could probably book something on the hoof and do something a couple of weeks beforehand, now everything's got to be done, visaed up, logistics sorted, because it's harder to find transport as well. So everything's got to be booked and confirmed and sorted well ahead of the game now, well ahead of the curve.
Yeah. And have you got any artists that have had like a specific moment in their live career that's had like a big impact, and how have you sort of capitalized on that moment?
I would say there's a lot to be said for networking with other artists. Hot Milk toured with Frank Carter. They also toured with the Foo Fighters. So there's been a lot of leg ups from other artists, which I 100% believe is a great thing. And actually having people that you know in the industry to help you out like that, it's always been like that. I've always worked with artists who've taken friends out and things like that. And that's the one thing I would always say to any managers and younger artists is make sure you've got a great network around you. And that's, I mean, I wouldn't say that's like sort of a huge live impact, but I would say it's a good life lesson.
Yeah, definitely. So again, thank you so much for your time. We'll come back to you with the panel. So if we move on to Ulysses now. So Ulysses, can you just briefly introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about your management company and who you're working with at the moment?
Yeah, so I'm Ulysses. Yes, I worked with Julie in the past, and Julie, I started 94 as well. There you go. I was in record labels from 94 on, and started a management company 2004. Back then I came from Sony and started to manage Apocalyptica, that Finnish cello band. I don't know, Julie, did we anything together there? I think we did. I don't remember. I still manage them. I wasn't, huh?
I think we tried, but I don't think it actually ever worked out.
Yeah, maybe. I don't remember, to be honest. Anyway, so I still managed the band. I was alone in the beginning in 2004. I formed the company. We're 11 people now. And I started more to manage managers than manage artists. I have a roster of artists I manage, and I have people I do that with in the company. Some of them are rock and metal, some of them are not. It's very diverse. And then I have people there who basically have their own roster, and they join my company, and I basically give them a home, pay them a wage, give them an infrastructure, give them a network to do exactly what we just talked about. And they have their own roster they manage, and I help them with that. So it's those two things basically we're doing there.
Amazing. Thank you. And what do you feel like your biggest success has been with regards to like live and touring with maybe one of the artists that you've worked with in the past?
Yeah, I had time now to think about what you said, and it's not really like was the biggest show something. One of the biggest, for me, big achievements always where I wanted to have bands in specific venues to play and have that as a goal to get. And with Apocalyptica, we always wanted to play Sydney Opera House, and when that happened finally, that was maybe one of the best things happened. I have another band from Sweden I manage. I started with them when they did their third show, a showcase I went to, and when I saw that, and then a few years later they sold out Sporthall in Hamburg, that was pretty amazing to see. That was maybe the equivalent to your indie band coming from nowhere and playing Ahoy all of a sudden. So for me, it was always more like, it was either the venue we always try to achieve, or it was when you see the journey of the band and where it ends up with, or where it gets to at one point in the career.
Yeah, that's always the best thing, is watching the journey from my point of view as well.
Yeah.
So again, flipping it back to kind of like the negative side of things, but have you come across, like, what's the biggest challenge you've come across, and how do you feel you've overcome that challenge in live and touring?
It's definitely the crews we talked about, the costs which exploded. But I think the main thing I had, and we always have, is that cultures in different countries are so different, and it takes a while to get it. You need to go. You need to understand how French people work, and you need to be there, and you need to listen, and you kind of need to follow, and you kind of need to make that, you know, your recipe for your band in the market. You need to understand how American agents click. I completely got your story. And you sit there, you think like you have a fan, and that's the one you want to go with as your agent, and all of a sudden he's never coming back to you anymore. And I think it's a cultural thing. It's not like you treat them, it's more like how they grew up and how they do things. And that's maybe the biggest challenge, and where my biggest mistakes happened.
And how have you sort of overcome those mistakes or challenges?
Well, either I did the mistakes and try to learn from them, or
Yeah.
you know, or you need to go there. You need to find out. You need to call Julie and ask her to explain me what happens in the UK with Brexit and touring, or the agent in the UK, and people in record labels and people in publishers and publicists and everyone to get a picture of the market, and the different culture, and build your plans accordingly.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Talk. Yeah.
Have you got an artist that you've worked with where you feel like live touring has been specifically crucial to their career, and sort of what strategy has that been?
I mean, my whole idea was, when I started the company, when I came off record labels, was that I wanted to find something which is not very German centric, but more international. And it should be a touring artist. So any artist I was looking for and I signed was always a touring artist. Maybe I signed a Finnish band called Weir. It's a prog metal band, and it's in the very beginning, but there's basically no media for such a genre. It's all touring, it's all network, it's all friendly bands who take you out on the road. You go to very niche event festivals to play, and you grow in there. Maybe that's the band which sticks out, where it's most essential that touring is the key and nothing really else in the beginning.
And in terms of any of the sort of emerging artists that you work with at the moment, has there been sort of newer challenges again since sort of post-COVID, and how have you overcome them? What's the biggest challenge you had with them?
The COVID thing didn't really do anything for that to me. There were other challenges with it, but I cannot really say that changed anything in viewing it. It's you hear the song, you want to repeat it, you do it, great.
Yeah.
That's one thing. And maybe the biggest changes, or when we started to look differently, was when everything shifted from physical to streaming. And can you work band or artist X, Y, and Z in a new under new circumstances, with new plans? How can you explain promoters in that world that they maybe never do an album again? Stuff like that. So it was much more the shift into streaming, which changed the look on new artists to work with, than it was COVID.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Shall we go to the general questions for everyone? So I'll just ask a question. If anyone wants to answer it, jump in. Or, so again, you kind of roughly covered this, but what do you think are the biggest struggles specifically for rock and metal artists coming through on the live side of the industry?
You need to find an agent. I think that's the crucial thing. If you don't have the agent who you can work with as a manager, you have a relationship with, and who understands your artist, there's not really a way to get the outlets you need for the artist.
Yeah, we'll start in again from sort of the very basics then. Like, what advice would you give someone that's looking for an agent at the moment as a manager? Like, how would you go about doing that? What's the best advice you'd give a manager in finding an agent?
Good luck. I think it's the hardest thing you can do. I think it's like, it's relatively easy finding a record label. You find a publisher, you find someone to do your merch, you will have great ideas to do social media, but you find an agent who really does something for you. It's really, really hard, in my opinion.
Yeah. Has anyone else got any advice?
No, I totally agree. Getting
Yeah.
the agent, having the right agent for your act is crucial. And actually an agent who understands the band she will be working with. And also in this day and age, who is willing to go the extra mile, make the extra effort. I mean, I found it in the beginning. I also come from the label world, I have a big Sony music history myself, but probably before your time. So when I got into managing acts I'm always, my stance is always that we all have our own job. We all have our own expertise. So the agent has their expertise. But in the beginning, I found that they were waiting for me to tell them what to do. As in, I want 5 shows in the UK. Where I was actually expecting an agent to tell me, there's no point having 5 shows in the UK because there is no fan base, nobody's going to show up. No, they would get me 5 shows in the UK, only then for me to find out that there's no fan base and nobody would show up. So I had to learn how to, because to me, live agents, they're a different breed of people.
And would you say like just networking then and sort of building your network out is the best way of finding agents nowadays?
Absolutely.
A gig swap is absolutely imperative, especially for international artists. I mean, one thing I think we are missing talking about here, and it affects the band's entire career regardless. Whether you're looking for a record label, whether you're looking for an agent, whether you're actually looking for a manager, if there's as well, is the fact that you need to have, and it pains me to say it, and I hate this whole A&R by algorithm and A&R by numbers, but to have a decent online profile and to have decent figures and to have a decent streaming profile is really, really important these days. It's not everything. And I like you, Johan, and I would imagine that Ulysses is the same. I will still work with artists that are tiny baby artists, no managers, no following, no nothing, if I believe in it. Then when we do get to believe in it, I expect the band to work as hard as we do to build their profile. Because if bands don't do that, and it's possibly the biggest crime at the moment, bands expect everything to work, but they expect everybody else to do the work.
Yeah,
it's an issue, and they have to be perennially present digitally, speaking to people worldwide, pushing the streaming, and actually having a decent online shop front, making everything look coherent, making it look like, something's not from 1986 when the band are in 2024. It's not right.
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever I start a conversation with a new potential act that I'd like to work with, probably during the first 5 minutes, I will say, I work hard, but you work harder. It's your career.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Yeah. And what other partners, like business partners, do you think would you bring on with like a new artist in order to help live and touring, not just an agent? Like, would you use like PRs, again, labels? How crucial are those sort of roles to the touring side of it and helping to gain an agent?
I think PRs are definitely a double-edged sword on this, because the amount of PRs that we've employed when they've got literally no results and they say, we can't make people like the band, makes me want to turn this table over, because that is the definition of PR, really. So, I mean, honestly, you're better off knowing your way around your digital services, knowing your way around digital advertising, which isn't as difficult as it sounds. And a small digital spend done correctly, do your research first, can have a lot more impact than paying somebody €1,000 a month to get 3 reviews that 12 people read.
Yeah, and I know online sort of presence is so important nowadays, and sort of the streaming and all the figures and the fan base and everything. So in terms of finding shows in like other locations, how would you recommend bands go about touring or getting shows in an area where they may have a small fan base, but they've never played that area before, especially if they don't have like an agent already? Is it a case of like working with local promoters, or is it a case of really pushing the online things before you go to that area?
I wouldn't do it without an agent.
See, I would, and that's the thing. I've done it with bands who don't have agents who've gone out there, but the caveat is that they know bands in that territory, so there's a safety net there. But it's a two-way street, you know. I mean, I think with us, we work with bands that are quite small, and we push it, and we do give them tour support and things as a label. So we've always got people in those territories as well. I would never send somebody to a territory without support.
Well, that band Weir I mentioned earlier, we have now done close to 60 shows in the US without an agent. We just got them support.
Yeah.
And we're closely now to get an agent assigned for them. But we already have the feeling there are markets we can play headline shows because they played there quite many times. The problem is you don't get the agent early, unless you want to have a good one. So you need to come up with a great idea. I agree with Julie. It's you need others to help them, and you need to get your numbers right. I think today, if they don't have ideas how they present themselves, how they want to turn up on YouTube, if they don't want to understand what, I don't know, YouTube Shorts is, I'm saying something, they don't need to know it, but they want to understand it. If they don't want to, they have no chance. They need to adopt and play that in a way that they have a presence, and the manager can actually explain what the artist is about. That's maybe the very first thing.
Yeah,
and in terms of
actually I mean, just underlining that, there are people now that are called audience development managers, and if you get somebody who's good, they can do a lot more in the back end with your socials and with your profile than a PR person would. And again, it all kind of pulls everything back together, in that your numbers make a difference to your fan base, which makes a difference to what your agent sees, which makes a difference to your streaming, which it's painful. I mean, artists are expected to be an all-encompassing entity now. When I first started in the industry, an artist used to write good music, to good music, possibly look pretty rock and roll. Now they have to be a self-generating PR machine and an ideas machine and a digital marketer and a content machine as well. And I find that really painful because it's not what they should really be concentrating on. But sadly, everybody's jobs have evolved. And I mean, I don't even call us a record label anymore. We're really an entertainment company because we do so much more.
Yeah. And when it comes to obviously tour support tours seem to be quite crucial in like building your live business. How would you recommend managers go about getting those supports at this moment? Because I've found it's been a lot more difficult recently, like a lot of, because of the financial parts of it, a lot of bands are only taking sort of like label mates or, you know, friends or things like that, or bands that are selling like, you know, a lot of tickets on the tour and things like that. Like, what advice would you have for gaining those crucial support slots at this moment in time?
It's I think it's the bands also amongst themselves talking, knowing people, making the calls. I can call the agent, but when the singer in my band can call the guitar player in the other band, that's probably the most effective.
And I mean and some of this stuff I'm hating myself for saying it, to be quite honest, but I mean, there is such a thing, as I'm sure everybody is aware of, as buy-ons, which I don't particularly agree with. But if it was a huge tour, it's a good opportunity. But what we've done in the past, and I mean, I'm talking in a different incarnations, more so when I was doing Visible Noise, is that we've worked with companies like sync companies or with branding and endorsements companies to get money in, whereby they become part of the tour. So they become a promotional partner or an investment partner in the tour as well.
Yeah, definitely. And again, kind of leading on to like financial side of things, is like a lot of bands are struggling with gaining fees for these sort of tours and things. Like, how would you go about negotiating like the best deal for your band, or would you rely on like outside funding for those kind of support slots or just general touring sort of nowadays?
So different. It's so
Yeah,
case on case thing.
depends on the artist. It's
Yeah.
case by case.
Yeah.
Have you had anything that's worked really well, as in like a sponsor or like found funding from somewhere at this moment that you would advise other managers to kind of look into?
I've had a band where we've had old-fashioned traditional label support to tour to make the tour happening. Yeah.
There's a
I
thing.
think it's anything. I think what it really is you need to have a plan. It's like, I think there are quite a few people from Finland here. They have an amazing system supporting bands. It's about the plan there, and it's about the strategy and how you get that across to those people. Then you have an amazing partner to help you breaking the band or helping financing things. In other markets, maybe there is not that much money, but with the right strategy and plan, you maybe have your arguments on your side to get the tour, to find someone like Julie did with Visible Noise to fund it, or however they fund it, or even, you know, to cover costs by selling enough merch or something. We had a band out, pretty expensive touring, fees were not close to it, but they were so strong on merchandise and we could kind of rely on it. It worked as well. They would never take the shot to do it. And it was maybe more like, we saying, you know, worst case, we need to help you out financially and loan you the money, but we are 100% sure you're going to make it on the merchandise. So you kind of kick them a bit off the cliff to do it. But that's another income source. It's just you need to calculate right and have a plan right.
Yeah, I mean, for UK managers, the BPI do certain funding grants as well. I got one for a band called Fearless Vampire Killers a while ago. Again, when I was managing, and it's the is it the Momentum Fund? I think I can't remember. But that's absolutely brilliant, and that's specifically for touring outside the UK. So you can use it for touring, you can use it to put into merch, you can use it for PR over there. But it's a music. I beg your pardon. It's the Music Export Growth Grant. So it's MEGS. But that's absolutely brilliant. And I mean, speaking to people who are at the BPI is also really interesting. I mean, it goes for things like South by Southwest. I mean, it's an expensive do that anyway, but there are grants available to help export.
Talking of South by Southwest, that kind of leads me on to my next question, is festivals. What advice would you give for managers trying to get their artists onto festival bills, especially as like now is kind of crucial time for next summer to start booking those slots?
Depends on the size of the artist, because they won't book in the undercard until considerably closer to the event, really.
Okay. What about sort of newer artists that are maybe just starting out on the festival circuit?
It depends on the country.
Yes.
It really does. I mean, in the Benelux or in Germany, or Finland, you have tons of festivals. And again, you can build a strategy and you say 1 year you go for a lot of smaller events, but you reach a lot of people and you maybe play better slots. And the next year you play bigger events if you're able to get them, but you know your fees will be bad and your positioning will be bad. So it really depends on where in the cycle you are for the festivals and what territory you want to play.
Yeah,
we see that over here. I'm in Germany. We see that you have bands who do an A cycle, a B cycle on festivals, and then they do a summer where they do headline shows, outdoor headline shows, and then they would go back and do A festivals. So it's really, you build it depending on where you are.
Yeah, definitely. Have you got any last minute kind of advice that you'd like to give any of the managers on this call on, like, you know, on the live side and business side before we go to like questions and answers with the audience?
Maybe zoom in on what Ulysses was saying. My experience is that all artists, all they say is, I want to play, play, play. Why don't we play? I want to play, play, play. And I always say, fine, we need a plan, and then we play. You have to have a plan, and it has to make sense.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fun to travel to wherever, to Portugal, to play a nice show, but if there's no backup, if there's no follow-up, you've had a nice mini vacation, basically. So,
But an expensive one.
Yeah. But you have to have a plan. It has to be part of a plan, and you have to plan ahead with your artist and tell them it will come.
Yeah, I agree. Couldn't agree more.
Strategy is key.
Strategy, planning strategy. Yeah, that's great advice from everyone. Okay, shall we go to question and answers? I don't know, Dennis, are you running this one?
Here I am again. Yes, anybody in the audience, if you have questions, you can either raise your hand and we can unmute you, you can ask it, or you can drop them in the chat. So I'm scrolling back. Omar Marcelo had a question. Doesn't it make more sense to have a fan base first before touring?
It's a chicken and the egg.
Yeah. And I think it totally depends on the music.
Yeah.
It absolutely does. The more niche you can be, the more you can be in a subgenre, the easier it might be to build a fan base without touring. The wider it gets, I guess you need to play. You need to showcase yourself.
Plus, in this day and age, it's also a question, what is a fan base? How do you measure a fan base? I've seen bands that had like 200,000 followers on Facebook, and then they played a show in my country and 50 people would show up.
Yeah. And how can you measure it when there's things like click farms and everything as well? Absolutely. I mean, I completely agree with this comment, but I think if you're going to go out and do your own headline, yes, you need to make sure that there's a fan base there to do it. But the idea of going out and touring on a larger scale bill as a support is to build up a fan base. And without, it's again, chicken and egg situation. It's got to be a mixture of both. I mean, if you're going to go out and do 150 cap club shows and sell them out, that's to your fan base. If you're going to go out and get like another 30, 40, 50 people a night added to your fan base, that's touring and that's support slots.
There's one more thing. I know Wally is here. I discussed with Wally at Reeperbahn last week. Basically, in all European countries are rock radios by now, and they play metal stuff as well. Not everything, but they do play. I think it's absolutely underrated. I think that there is so much possibility to get songs played in specific markets, or maybe in all the markets, to rock radio and start on the back of that. We have a few bands who are strong on rock radio, and wherever we have a station playing it, we really see impact on live. We really see impact on streaming. The more metal it is, we even see impact on download. And it helps getting festival bills. It's not very PR. It's not very, this is what the band is about and you tell a story. It's very song driven, but Spotify is very song driven as well. So that can be an option for a few things.
Let me see, there are a few more questions. Ott asked, asking for heavy music Estonia, NGO, would it make sense for metal bands to target showcase festivals? Lately, they seem to be more targeted towards pop and indie, etc.
Case by case basis, definitely. I mean, honestly, personally, I don't go for showcase stuff. I go for discovering and word of mouth, A&R and recommendations. I think a lot of the showcase stuff now is, again, it's pay to play, which can be quite, don't know, but that's just my point of view, and that's where it's been in the past. It could be different in different territories.
Yeah, the question Katja asked is kind of related to that. What is the right timing for showcase festivals? Anybody?
Sorry.
I don't know, Julie. I think it's part of strategy. You know, there is a moment. It's good you have them at the Great Escape.
That's a specific thing, yeah. And I mean, there is the International Festival Forum, and there's a lot of other stuff that we have in the UK where people can go and play a showcase. They're picked up by agents and they go out and do university touring, college touring. But again, a lot of these are very, very, and I mean, this is a really interesting conversation because I've always found it challenging to find specific places for the heavier end of music. And it's nice to have that community. And I mean, I've had this community around me for like 3 decades, but find your people is one of the best things I can tell you to do, because there's no real such thing as showcases for metal music that are respectable. I genuinely believe that. And I think if you're going to do it, go out and do it yourself and get a load of bands together and make it an event and make it for the fans. And then people will come anyway, because they'll see a lot of people going to it. You know, build it, they will come, I believe they said.
Yep.
Let's see what other questions we got. As everyone said, there's a lot expected of artists these days, therefore they need help, a team. How can we go about training our developing professions for the roles that are missing, managers and agents in particular?
Oh. Tough one.
That is a really tough question. I mean, again, I started out literally doing everything on my own, and I do understand how difficult it is. And I'm reading, is it Shireen's comments here? And I mean, all I can say is just keep your head down and keep on sticking to what you believe in, because you can get really demoralized, you can get really fed up, and you can feel like you're being overlooked for the sake of other people who've got larger bands. But there's always a light bulb moment with things. And I mean, if you stick to your guns, it will happen, but you've really got to believe in yourself. And I mean, I was going out to conferences and festivals and stuff on my own with tiny black metal artists and having to like sort of try and get people to make tell people to take notice of those, and they've probably got 20 people going to see them at the Devil's Church on a Sunday night. It's hard work, but there's more ways of promoting artists, and there's more ways now of getting to people a lot easier. But you've got to do something that is memorable, and you yourself need to be memorable. Say please, say thank you, be funny, tell stories, ask them about the kids. If they've got a dog, what kind of dog is it? You know, I mean, it's about the human aspect as well. And
Absolutely.
that will ensure that people pick up the phone. If it's always about business and you're always asking for something, imagine that one friend that you've got who only phones you when they want something. You know, when it gets to August and suddenly it's like, hi, what you doing? What you doing next weekend when there's a huge festival and they just want tickets? You know, don't be that guy. Be the person that comes up with solutions or comes up with really good ideas.
True.
I think considering the time, we're going to move into breakout rooms and can continue the conversation there. Thank you for participating in this panel. It was very informative.